Honorable Speaker, I think that the rise of childhood influencers is bad in a myriad of ways. But in this speech, what we're going to focus on is why it is that this is a type of celebrity that is uniquely harmful for the kid, and therefore we regret this rise. I want to be exceptionally clear from opening government about the approach that we take to this round analytically. We think that these are bad wholesale, and we regret them, and we would rather they simply had not happened. That is to say, we believe that the parents who record this type of content simply in an alternative world should not have done so. We think that this is a reasonably likely characterization of what could have happened instead, because there's a lot of different type of contents that could be created with similar themes. People who wish to explore their family dynamics can simply make videos talking about their family and their relationship, highlighting the adults who are a part of that family and not the children. People who wanted to make information about child rearing and their kids would be able to do so without putting their child in front of the camera, right? We think that because there is so much different type of content instead, we think that the likely counterfactual, as we see in many countries that have implemented laws that ban this type of behavior, would likely have trended in this way. And we believe that would have been a much healthier dynamic for children involved. I want to be clear about the weighing in this round. We think that childhood welfare comes above and beyond every other consideration in this debate. That is to say, the direct emotional well being of that kid comes first. Why? First of all, because when it comes to material well being, what we see is that in a lot of countries, particularly in the United States, there are very few laws and regulations that exist to ensure that the children are paid for their work. Meaning that even if opposition was able to argue that this could be beneficial because some families make some considerable amount of money, the fact that we can't guarantee that any of this goes to the child, both because there is no laws ensuring it and because there is no guarantee that these parents actually make considerable amounts of money to be able to give their kids, we shouldn't be prioritizing the potential for financial success. Secondly, the reason why childhood development should be important here is because obviously these kids are incapable of consenting to this type of arrangement. They cannot agree to be put on camera because they are not of age to be able to fundamentally determine and deliberate on a contract. Meaning that even if we could say that there are some material benefits that exist to them, the fact that they cannot consent to this means that those should be placed less than because they cannot determine the trade-offs here, meaning we should take a risk-averse approach to this debate. With this being said, there are two arguments I would like to advance. First, that this creates a bad situation for children regarding their relationships with others. Why is this the case? The first reason that this is the case is because when parents are creating this type of content, oftentimes a lot of vulnerable private moments about a kid are put on the internet to be shared with the world. This often looks like important developmental milestones that maybe people may have wanted to be private. There are plenty of parents who, for example, upload instances of children completing potty training or children getting, their first, a bodily change and that being uploaded. But it also includes private moments, like things that were embarrassing for a kid to go through, something that made them feel shame or embarrassed or hurt. This is harmful. First of all, because the child now is having all of their other relationships formed by the fact that this is public and available information about themselves. This is to say that somebody at a young age at the same school as that kid can have easily come across this video and then use this to bully and shame that child for this video's existence. If you think this is far-fetched, think about how easy it would be as a mean-spirited 13-year-old to take a video of your, classmate's mother who uploaded a embarrassing moments from you when you were 4 years old and then simply share that video with everyone in the class or quote what that parent said in a mocking tone towards this kid. This is a uniquely harmful form of bullying and harassment towards a kid for a few reasons. The first is that this is something that is highlighting unique insecurities and personal details about a child that in no other circumstance would have become available to that type of person, meaning that you are preying on the specific insecurities of this kid to be able to harm them, meaning that the harm of this bullying is exacerbated. The second reason why this is harmful is because there's even less control over these narratives that these kids have. This is to say that when a decade of content has already been published, has already been consumed by millions of people. There is no outrunning this type of information. In status quo, in most cases, people can change schools, move towns, get a new haircut, dress differently, go to the gym, take up new hobbies, meet new friends. And oftentimes that can work to avoid some of the harassment that they're getting. But no matter what they do, these videos are publicly available online for millions to see, meaning that no matter what they go through, because it is attached to their real name, to their real parents, it is always going to be able to be thought out. The second difficulty is that you then have an inability to be authentic with other classmates, right? There's an asymmetry involved now when you are making friends. When people know so much about your personal life and what you've gone through and who you are and every detail of your life, and you don't even know the other person's name, it becomes difficult to make genuine relations with other people because you never really know how much they know about you and what they could be hiding from you. Even if this isn't true in all circumstances, the fact is that this is a significant enough consideration, which means that it is going to become difficult for you to be vulnerable with one another, meaning you keep others at a distance, which means that you isolate yourself and have fewer friends. The second claim I would like to advance is that this makes relationships worse between children and their parents. Why? First, because at young stages of development, what this often looks like is when parents are trying to shoot content, you never get content right on the first try, meaning that you're often repeating the same shoot. You're asking your child to repeat a thing that they just did so that it can look right on camera. This is damaging because it means that you signal to the kid from a young age that you maybe don't care about them as much or that you view them primarily as a commodity. The problem that this creates is that you then don't develop a particularly unique bond with your child because you see them as something to be sold, meaning that you don't, for example, get to learn as much about what they're interested in or don't allow them to pursue those types of interests as much because allowing them to do something that is unmarketable or unpalatable to the audience that you've created online means that you directly lose out on funding. Additionally, when children are aware that they are not actually being taken seriously as their own independent agents, they grow a significant amount of resentment, right? When you realize that your parents are not really interested in what you're doing, when you realize that your parents are asking you to do the same thing over and over because they don't care about how you feel, but because they want it to look good on camera, you grow to distrust them and dislike them, which I think puts a permanent harm in that relationship. Proud to propose.
Ladies and gentlemen, we think we should support the child influencer because it is a good form of economic empowerment and also a form of children's autonomy. Before I start with my argument, I would like to do some preemption to the opposition case. First of all, I don't think that child influencers are likely to be abused. Let's first analyze the parents' incentive. First of all, I think majority of parents love their kids because they have biological links with the kids, so it hurts their heart if they see that kids are being abused. But second of all, I just think that even if we are talking about selfish parents, it is within the incentive to ensure kids live and thrive in a positive and happy environment so that kids gonna look happy and so that kids are going to cooperate with video shooting or any kind of work with regards to child influencers, right? But thirdly, I think parents generally just want to avoid the risk of getting called out by public, given the fact that the canceling culture currently is pretty mature. Therefore, they know that if they abuse the kids, there's going to be a lot of repercussion, not just from the legality aspect, but also from this social backlash. That is why parents have incentive to ensure and not to abuse their kids. But second of all, we also think that there are just generally a lot of check and balance mechanism existing in the status quo. First of all, in terms of public scrutiny, we think that the followers who follow these type of child influencer channel are probably people who really, really enjoy or love kids content, right? That is why majority of these followers probably, really gonna care about the condition of the kids, right? Maybe some of them are parents themselves. That is why if kids show any sign of abuse or appear distressed, these kind of things will be scrutinized by the public, and it's very easy for people to start discussion in the comment section, and this thing can easily just burst into a viral discussion, right? But second of all, we think that in the status quo, there are generally a lot of platforms that are already implementing age-appropriate content rules, and that ensures parents, making sure that being compliant to the kind of content that they are created. That is why when we talk about, for example, YouTube or Netflix, we have like the kids version YouTube or social media channel where it helps to filter out toxic comments that can prevent cyberbullying for kids, right? But truly, even if we are talking about entertainment industry, we already have some legal aspect protection on kids. For example, we limit the working hours per day for kids. We ensure that certain amount of salary that the kids earn go into a trust fund that can only be unlocked by the kids themselves when they become an adult. We also have child labor laws like the Coogan law for child actors that protect the earnings and the working condition of kids. I think these things generally can spread to the non-entertainment industry, aka the social media channel as well. Now let's talk about two arguments. First, why this is a unique form of economic empowerment for families and kids. The first mechanism that I'm going to provide is I just think that influencing, child influencer can generally provide significant income, especially for low-income household, that will allow them to use this money to fund for education and necessity for the family household, right? This looks at how kids are able to monetize their hobbies, right? For example, they can just showcase the talent at, gaming, or showcase the talent at, drawing arts, or that basically gonna give them a lot of reward in the digital economy. The problem with opposition is I think the comparative in the world is just generally worse because first of all, the kids might not be good at studying. So if you don't allow them to, involve themselves in this child influencing industry, they probably force them to, pursue a study and, making sure that they get a degree. There's a high chance that they probably won't even get a good job in the future anyway, especially the world is becoming more and more competitive now. But number two, I just think that especially for low income family, the parents probably don't have enough of money to secure financing for the kids' tertiary education, etc. So I think at least in our world, when kids are able to be a child influencer, they can use this money to build a better future for themselves, right? But thirdly, I think that the comparative of child influencer job are probably traditional child labor job, for example, a factory worker, which is usually quite paid quite badly and is usually not that well, not protected that well by the legal aspect, right? In our world, at least we think that child influencing is a low risk and home based job, right? Which means that any types of video or content being created will be supervised and by the parents. So parents can always protect the kids whenever, potential abuse is going to happen, right? But second of all, especially in this digital economy world, this is going to be a scalable rewards, right? Because oftentimes when the kids channel is doing well, they can get a lot of sponsorship from companies and that would give them a lot of money, right? But thirdly, I think these earnings can generally be saved in the trust fund and that will secure a child future in the child's future. But fourthly, I also think that this is a good exposure to the kids because kids, while managing or handling this type of content, they can learn things about branding, content creation, and I think this will give them a early career advantage. And we do see this is what is happening in the status quo. We see how many influencers have been transitioning in, from child influencer into career like media, marketing, technology. Therefore, we think early experience is valuable. Second argument, I just think this is a form of kids' autonomy and self-expression. We think that childs, like adults, have the right to explore their interests and express themselves creatively. And becoming an influencer is a form of self-expression because they can use this, their own content or their own channel to have artistic expression or social engagement. They might want to talk about their hobbies with people who they want to share with, right? They want to discuss about the issues that uniquely only affect kids, right? They want to express their feeling. We think that it's just very contradictory for opposition to not support this form of expression because if society generally already allowed child actors, child models, or child athletes to exist in the status quo, we think that we should extend this right to the kids, even in the digital world. Denying this opportunity basically undermines the autonomy because we are basically saying that kids don't have the capacity to make the choice for their own life. Not to mention the alternative in opposition world is worse because if you don't support it, parents who are desperate for money will probably still do it and they will do it in the worst instances where they're going to do it illegally, where there's not going to be any public scrutiny and legal protection protecting kids. Panels. Child influencer aren't inherently harmful, but the exploitation is. We should focus on the ethical creation and protecting the kids instead of abolishing it.